Hello, and welcome inside my chewy head. What kind of person gets locked up in a mental hospital? Someone violent, unpredictable, dangerous? What does it take to end up on an acute psychiatric ward? And if you did, would you ever tell anyone about it? This podcast is about dispelling myths, fear, and stigma surrounding mental health from my own personal experience as a patient. Right, I have already tried to record this episode so many times, and it's so hard because I have so much to say about Tina, and I'm so excited to be talking about her and sharing some of the most hilarious stories to do with her that I'm kind of going all over the place. So I'm going to try and really focus this time and make sure that this is the one. This is the one. Okay, Tina. Tina was one of the first people I encountered on the ward. She was in her mid-60s. She had some sort of long-term learning difficulty. I don't know exactly what she had, but she definitely had a learning difficulty. And she was a real character. The reason that I got to know her so quickly was because she was sharing with me in my dormitory, and I could hear her. She was the first person that I kind of encountered a patient, really, because I could overhear through my curtain, which I'd obviously drawn around my bed as like some sort of really, really weak defense against this new environment that I found myself in. And I could hear her moaning and groaning and like talking to someone, and I was thinking, who are you talking to? And then obviously I realized I'm in a psychiatric unit. She's probably not talking to anyone. Yeah, so that was kind of my first indication of who she might be. And then later on, a healthcare assistant came in that morning and was like, "Come on, let's get you dressed, Tina. It's time to get up." And, she was almost like a child when I heard her. So I really didn't know how old she was without having seen her, because she was like, "Oh, I don't want to get dressed," and all of this. And I was thinking, oh, okay. I'm in an institution where people dress you. Is someone going to try and dress me? Like, is this normal? It was really very overwhelming. And I have to say that, if I'm being honest again, my arrogance of thinking that whoever this person was, they were immediately, before I'd even seen this person, I had kind of dismissed her and kind of put her to the side and thought, no, she's not someone I can engage with. And that is to my shame. And something that obviously, as my time in the institution progressed, I love that I'm calling it the institution now, by the way, I learned more about her and got to know her and realised that actually I'm no better than she is, and vice versa. So anyway, Tina, first of all, let me just give you my observations. Now, know that I'm, although, you might be surprised to know this, I'm not actually a mental health expert. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I don't even have a counselling qualification. I've never even done one of those online courses. In fact, you know what? I shouldn't really admit this, but as a teacher, you have to do all these online assessments, just every now and then. We had to do one in extremism or something. Yeah, I always just pressed the right buttons and didn't really take it that seriously. So that's my experience of mental health prior to going into hospital, obviously. However, having spent a considerable amount of time on the ward, I kind of spent my time, as I said in my last episode, trying to become almost a psychiatrist and trying to figure out what everyone had. With Tina, it was very obvious that she was schizophrenic because she was talking to someone who wasn't there, and she would do that quite happily. And to be honest, they seemed to have a great time together because she would always be laughing, and she'd always be like talking really quietly to that person, which was fine when it was the daytime. It was less fine when it was the nighttime, because one of the main things about Tina was that she did not sleep. So sharing a bedroom with her was strenuous, I would say. So basically what would happen is lights out at, I don't know, I can't remember what time it was, 9:30, something like that. 10 o'clock maybe. Probably 10 o'clock actually. Well, not in our dormitory it wasn't, because basically she would get up and turn the light on and then leave and go out into the main communal area. And she would do that on and off all night. I'm not joking. I counted one time because obviously I've been woken up and I thought, might as well. 11 times. 11 times in one night she would get up. And the weirdest thing is, right, she'd get up, turn the light on, walk out the dormitory. I would then get up, turn the light off, go back to bed. And then she would return from wherever she'd been or whatever the hell she'd been doing. I don't even know what would you be doing? I don't know. Probably smoking a pipe. Oh, I'll tell you about that. I haven't told you about that. She would then return into the dormitory, turn the light on, and then get into bed. How does that make any sense? Honestly, it used to absolutely infuriate me. And that brings me on to kind of the first thing I learned from Tina, which is if you want to survive and get any sleep on this ward, first of all, you need sleeping tablets. Second of all, you need a face mask. Thirdly, you need earwax. What's it called? Not earwax. What am I thinking of? You know, the thing that you put in your ears. Headphones, not headphones. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure you do. You need those. So that was my first learning curve, courtesy of Tina. In terms of my first interactions with her, as I say, pipe. She didn't smoke a pipe. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking like Sherlock Holmes pipe sort of thing. No. But the first time I met her and had a conversation with her, I was waiting to get my meds, so I was standing outside the dispensary, and she just like comes comes through, breaks right in front of me, and I was like, okay, all right, whatever. And she was like, can I have a pipe, please? Can I get a pipe? And I was like, oh, are we having a pipe, are we? Yep, go on then, I'll have a pipe as well. And she was really touchy-feely as well. So like she would like come up to you and she would give you like a kiss and stuff and like hug you. Which, you know, if you know me, you'll know I'm not really that tactile, but I learned to kind of tolerate it. There was another woman in there who was like super, I don't know exactly. Again, this is me trying to be like a pseudo psychologist or whatever. But she definitely had OCD or something like that because she was absolutely obsessed with like cleaning and washing her hands. Like she spent the majority of the day washing her hands, I would say. But anyway, she would absolutely hate it when when Tina would like launch herself and give her a big kiss. And yeah, that was, to be fair, in a really cruel way, that was quite entertaining to watch. Yes. Anyway, so she's asking for a pipe. And I'm there like, yeah, go on then, I'll have a pipe as well. And the nurse is like, yeah, okay, what flavour do you want? And I'm thinking this is obviously some sort of weird banter that these guys have. No, it's not. He then produces an electronic cigarette. So I quickly worked out that on the NHS, you can be prescribed bloody e-cigarettes, or not even prescribed. If you just wanted them, you could have them. Yeah. So I was then given an e-cigarette, and I was thinking, I don't want an e-cigarette. Why the hell have I got this? Who did I give it to? Obviously, Tina. Immediately, she falls in love with me. Okay. This woman, as long as you gave her what she wanted, she was like, she thought you were God, basically. E-cigarettes on the NHS. And can I just say that one e-cigarette was the equivalent of 30 cigarettes, and you were allowed up to two of those a day. And some people were out of both by lunchtime and were arguing with the staff about getting more. They were like really high value items when you were in the ward because if you had one, people would do you favour. It's a bit like prison, I suppose. Not really, but yeah. Anyway, so that was Dina and her pipe. Dina was a big pipe smoker, all times of the day and night, which often resulted in her losing her pipe underneath her bed, or I don't even know where she. Basically, what would happen is I would be asleep, and by now I'd bought an eye mask, and I'd bought those earwax things I can't remember the name of. So I'd be trying to, and obviously I was drugged up to the eyeballs, trying my hardest to sleep. And in the middle of the night, I kid you not, she would come into my bedroom area, my curtain basically, tear the curtain apart, shake me on the shoulder and be like, I've lost my pipe, I've lost my pipe. And I'd be like, what? Because I'd be like half asleep and it'd be like 4 a.m. Sometimes she'd wake me up twice in a night and it was less of a surprise the second time. And I would have to like grope around in the dark, half asleep, on loads of like heavy medication, like trying to find this pipe just so I could go back to sleep. Honestly, it really was. You couldn't write it. The other thing she absolutely loved to do, and I assume that she did love to do it because she did it to a lot of people, was walk in on people on the toilet. She just loved to do that. The doors were locked. I have no idea how she got in, but I'm not joking. I think it was probably 5 times that she walked in on me having a wee, and I'll be honest with you, by time number 3, I didn't really mind anymore. You know, I thought I left my dignity outside the ward, so come on in. And she did. And she kind of had the same attitude towards her own toilet breaks. So she would quite happily go for a poo or a pee, door wide open, everyone could see. She had no kind of, oh my gosh, the best thing ever was when someone bought her a bra or something, a new bra. Well, she was standing in the dispensary queue, just flashing it to everyone, showing everyone her new bra. And we had to be like, no, 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 put that away, put that away. So yeah, she had no boundaries basically, and she didn't expect you to have any boundaries, which was entertaining, I would say. She was very entertaining. Queues were another thing, which actually ended up getting her in quite a bit of trouble with other members who were potentially less tolerant of the ward community, shall I say. So she would push in the queue. So remember that these queues, you'd be queuing for your drugs. You were told that that I don't know, dispensary would happen at 9 o'clock, and you could be queuing there for, I don't know, an hour. And that isn't me exaggerating. You would stand there in a corridor staring at a wall for an hour waiting for the nurses. The nurses like to barricade themselves in their office. I think they were typing notes, and they probably were very busy. But when you were standing there waiting for your medication that you had to get, if you didn't have your medication and try to go to bed without it, they would wake you up and get you up and force you to go. So it was an inevitability that you had to take these drugs. So you'd be waiting there and you'd be burning with impatience and anger and well, if you were me, despair, but that could have just been a condition, couldn't it? Anyway, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the hatch would open, a nurse would appear, start shoveling out the meds like it's nobody's business, and guess who would push in front of the queue to the very front? Tina. She just would time it perfectly, and she had no shame, absolutely no shame. She just went straight to the front of the queue, which made no sense because of everyone in the entire ward, she was the one who slept the least. So I don't really know why she felt the need to be at the front of the queue, but she did. And some people took that fairly well, other people not quite so well, and arguments did ensue as a result of that. But one of her great tactics for really, really kind of dispelling the queue was to just fart. She would fart really, really loudly, and they would always be horrendously smelly farts as well. So there were times where I'd been queuing for an hour, she comes through, pushes to the front of the queue, drops a massive fart, and I was like, do you know what? I'll come back. I cannot stand here. And she used to find it hilarious as well, and she'd laugh her head off. And again, people would get upset by this. One of the reasons that she had such terrible farts was that well, I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical professional, just in case any of you were thinking maybe I was. No, I'm not a medical professional, but she was diabetic and she ate so much crap. It was unbelievable. So I think she was a type 1 diabetic, which meant that she always had to have her blood sugar taken in the morning and in the evening. And without fail, I don't think there was a single day that I was in hospital where she had her blood sugar levels taken in the evening and they were like, brilliant, well done, Tina, you've got exactly the type of blood that we want from you. Or I don't really know, I'm not a diabetic or a medical professional, as I've said. But yeah, so she would just eat all this crap. Like a child, she was just attracted to sugar. So at dinner time, what the staff would do, because basically you ate your dinner off a tray of heated up microwave food or whatever it was, I don't even know. But you always ordered what you wanted, which was like a choice between mashed potato and oh my, I could do a whole episode, by the way, on food orders, because the amount of times that people ordered things and somebody else had scribbled out their order. And memorably, there was a time where my dinner was a plate of carrots because that was the only thing that someone hadn't scribbled out. And you got what you were given, and that was that. So that was quite entertaining. She would always order ice cream for pudding, and the healthcare assistants would always take it away from her and force her to eat her main meal before they gave her the ice cream. But she never wanted to eat the main meal. She was only interested in the ice cream. So she'd be like, "Oh, I can't eat anymore. I'm full. I'm I'm too full for this." And they were like, "Tina, you're not too full because, if you were too full, you wouldn't want your ice cream, would you?" And she's like, "No, I need my ice cream." Honestly, she was hilarious when it came to that. But as a result, she would literally go around the ward, and if there was anything lying out, like sweets or anything like that, she would be on it like a fly on shit, and it would be gone. Anything. Literally, we got these little, I don't know what they were, like little plastic boxes of juice. Not like a carton, less than that, and probably reconstituted concentrate juice, but whatever, that was what we got. She would be down in them in the little kitchen area if someone left the door open or whatever. So as you can imagine, not great for a diabetic, and there was actually this ban put on allowing her to have access to things, because sometimes other patients would give her their orange juice, for example, or they would give her their ice cream, and that was like banned. But she used to have her finger in every pie. So there was this one man, let's call him Roger. Roger came in probably about, I don't know, a few days after I did. Couldn't tell you what was wrong with him. As far as I was concerned, he seemed like the most normal person you've ever met in your life. Apart from the fact he wandered around in a football t-shirt the whole time, the same one, he just seemed really normal. He didn't seem, I mean, I don't know. I'm not him. And as I say, I'm not a medical professional, so I couldn't tell you exactly what was wrong with him. But he and Christina had this weird relationship where, because he was allowed to go out, he could go out and off the ward whenever he wanted. And that was like exactly what Christina wanted, because she wanted to be able to get more sweets and more chocolate. And he would go off the ward, she would give him a bit of money, and he would buy her chocolate or whatever. Yeah, they had like this special relationship that was basically focused on sweets and chocolate. But that was actually really bad, because obviously it wasn't good for her health at all. And it got to the point where he was told off by the staff for doing it. And then when he left, she was like a lost lamb. She could not go. She kept coming up to me and being like, "Can you go out? Can you go out and get me some sweets?" And I was like, "I'm not allowed to leave the ward. I can't. I'm sorry." But she would ask me every day all the same. But yeah, so what did I learn from Tina? Well, I learned, first of all, that I massively underestimated her. And she used this underestimation, as I mentioned, in order to manipulate situations to her advantage, which was really very clever. So, for example, she came across as though she didn't have a clue what was going on. Well, that was all a front as far as I'm concerned, because that woman knew exactly what was going on. She knew the meal times, and she would turn up for those meal times, and she would be there. And if they were late, she'd be shouting and complaining. She knew that at 11 o'clock, the newsagent trolley, her access to sweets, would arrive. Again, if it didn't show up, she would be complaining. She knew that this one girl, her mum always had sweets. So whenever this girl's mum came to the ward to visit, she would hover around them. So they're trying to have, like, a bit of family time and, I don't know, cuddle each other, or I don't really know what they were doing, but probably not cuddle each other. That sounds weird. No, they were probably just having a normal mother-daughter relationship. And she would just hover there until they gave her sweets. So she was just really, really focused on sugar. That was like her primary motivator for life. And honestly, like, it was just hilarious sometimes, the things that she would do in order to be able to get access to sweets and chocolate. And then whenever they would test her blood sugar in the evening, they'd be like, "Oh my God, it's 15 or whatever. Why is it so high? What have you had?" And she'd be like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know." And obviously she knew exactly what was going on. Secondly, I suppose I learned not to be arrogant. I remember once we had this conversation. I was a bit reclusive when I was in there. I didn't really like speaking to people. I did eventually. I came out my shell, but I was very reticent, I would say. Anyway, I was sat somewhere reading in that little ladies' lounge. It wasn't a ladies' lounge, but anyway, she comes in, sits opposite me, probably trying to see whether I've got a sweet in my pocket or whatever. I don't know. And oh yeah, I forgot to say, she absolutely loved my husband. She thought he was really fit or something, but she always used to say, "Is your husband coming to visit you? Oh, he's nice, isn't he? He's a lovely looking man." And I would always be like, "No, not today, Tina," even if he was, because I thought, please stay away from him. And she did actually try and kiss him. So not on the lips, obviously, and just like on the cheek. I don't really think it was like a sexual thing, but that did happen. Anyway, she was talking to me. She was saying, "Is your husband?" I said, "No, not today, Tina." And then I said, "What about you? Have you got a husband?" Anyway, and then she was telling me this story about how when she was younger, she'd wanted to get married to this man, or her parents had wanted her to get married to this man, and she'd been like, "No, it's not for me, really." And not since then, she hadn't really had any interest. We got to talking as far as you could with this woman, because quite honestly, you talked to her for 5 minutes, that was it. That's all the time that she had for you. Then she'd be off talking to someone else, trying to get some sweets from somewhere. That was basically her day plan. Anyway, I said, "How long have you been here, Tina?" 9 months. 9 months. How on earth can someone be on a acute psychiatric ward, which is supposedly for periods of acute stress or, like an emergency situation? How can someone be on an acute psychiatric ward for 9 months? I was absolutely shocked. So at the time, she was the person who had been on that ward the longest. And I was like, what, are they not letting you go home? Like, what's the plan? And also, another thing which I find interesting is that obviously she'd been on that ward for 9 months. They'd be giving her these meds for 9 months. Well, I came across her 9 months into her treatment, in air quotes, and she was still talking to people who weren't there, specifically this one person who she talked to all the time. She was still hardly sleeping. In what way was their treatment working? It didn't seem like it was working. But I actually, because of being in hospital so long and being on that ward for so long, I actually was able to see people come and people go, which I found predictably very depressing, because obviously I was still there, which wasn't great. But anyway, but she, really interestingly, they were trying to figure out what to do with her. So they kept bringing in this speech and language therapist to try and have sessions with her because they were trying to improve her or assess her understanding of things. I don't really know. But essentially, I would always do my colouring in the dining room because I didn't have my own room and I needed a table. So the dining room was the only one. And incidentally, the dining room was the room that they would use to have all these meetings with speech therapists or anyone really. So I ended up being completely unintentionally present at all these conversations, which probably weren't that appropriate for me to be present at. And I always had headphones in because I would listen to audiobooks, but I could hear what was going on. And quite honestly, it was some juicy gossip. So that's how much of a terrible person I am. But anyway, hilarious. This speech therapist comes. Tina says, "Oh, I'm too tired. I can't do it today." So this poor girl, she was younger than me, I think. She tried to have a session with me, and that was hilarious. I was like, "Excuse me, love, I'm an English teacher." No. Anyway, see, there's my arrogance again. Naughty, isn't it? Anyway, so the first time that she comes, Tina says, "I'm too tired." And they actually listen to that and they say, "Okay, fair enough." So she doesn't have to have this session. But the second time, they're a little bit more kind of pushy. And so basically, what she has to do is like match up these pictures with words or something. I can't really remember exactly. And it was just hilarious because she sat there with her eyes shut, being like, "Oh, I'm too tired. I'm too tired for this. I can't do this right now." And they were like, "Tina, if you don't do this, then you won't get your ice cream. You need to do this." And she was like, "Oh, I just can't. I can't do it." So she was pretending that she was exhausted. And then literally at that moment, the door opens and it's like, "Oh, the sweet trolley's here." And oh my God, I've never seen someone move so fast. So she managed to find some energy from somewhere, but she chose to direct it at the sweet trolley. And for the second time, she won that little battle because guess what? They didn't have that session. So good for her. So yeah, this is what I mean about Tina. She was really, if she didn't want to do something, she would not do it. And if she wanted to do something, she would make it happen. And mostly what she wanted to do was eat sugar, which happened very frequently, as her blood sugar level tests showed. At the time that I was moving, she was actually in the process of being moved on as well. But essentially, what they were planning to do with her was send her back home to live in her sheltered housing situation, which to me didn't really seem like much of a solution because obviously she couldn't really cope on her own. Like, she had someone to dress her, she had someone who would wash her, and she would always fight those things. She didn't want to get dressed, she didn't want to wash, and sometimes she really stank, but that's, neither here nor there, really, is it? But the point is, how is she supposed to live on her own again? Like, how obviously that didn't work in the first instance, and she's been on a ward for 9 months, and she's still talking to somebody who isn't there, and now she's going to be put back into the community. I found that really difficult to kind of appreciate because, as time went on, I got a bit of a soft spot for her, mainly because, she had a bit of a soft spot for me. And I think probably through her sheer willpower, I thought, oh, okay then. So yeah, and I guess, well, what do we learn about society through her. Well, we learn that basically the system isn't working for people like her because she was being delayed and delayed and delayed, because that was what was happening regarding her return to the community, was that because there weren't services in place to support her in the community, she couldn't go back to the community. So every week they would say to her, right, this week a woman's going to come round, I think probably a social worker, and she's going to meet with you and she's going to discuss your care plan for when you're in the community. Well, that never happened because of some other condition that was going on with this, whoever this woman was. I'm assuming a social worker, I don't know. In hospital, the treatment that she was receiving wasn't improving her condition. The plan for the community was just to put her back in exactly the same situation. Where's the future for this woman? Where's her opportunity to thrive? I didn't see that. And I felt sad when I left. Seeing her go made me feel sad. Sorry, seeing, not that she was going, I was going, but seeing her there made me feel sad, because for all I know, she's still there. And if she isn't there, she's probably actually worse off. And I found that incredibly sad, especially as, because she has a learning difficulty, she has this innocence about her and childlikeness about her that makes her really vulnerable. And I really strongly feel that people like her need nurturing and supporting. And unfortunately, perhaps due to finances or time or, not fitting criteria, which is often the case, isn't it, with public services, that's not happening for her. And I wish I could say that I had a solution. I had a magic wand that could be waved, and I would be able to have a better idea of what to do with Tina. But the reality is that the reason probably that she was in there for so long is that no one really knew what to do with her. And that's the sad reality of people with long-term mental health conditions, is that often they end up stuck. And so what can you learn and what can you take away from my experiences with Tina? She certainly made my time in hospital more enjoyable, purely for a comedy value, because, who wouldn't laugh when they'd been standing in a queue for an hour and a woman comes and pushes to the front of the queue, demanding a pipe and farting? But on a more serious, sober note, I suppose mainly you can take away how fortunate many of us are who have robust enough mental health to navigate the course and the complexities of normal everyday life, which unfortunately Tina didn't have. And as a result, she was so dependent on a system that unfortunately, due to perhaps a lack of understanding of mental health, a lack of research, medication, treatment, finance, support services, because of all of those things, she was let down and is let down. And wherever she is right now, I just hope that she is being cared for and that her needs are being met. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it and would like to carry on the conversation, I'd love it if you followed me on any of my socials. You'll find them linked down below. Equally, please do consider subscribing to this podcast, because that would be amazing, and we can create a little community, a positive space on the internet just for us. We can be called the Chewy Heads. How exciting. Next episode, I'll be talking about Brian, and I'll see you then.